as I went through her work. As a physicist, I don't know much about her, but when I started, learning about her, when I started, tracing about her, what kind of a person she is, I could know that she has transgressed these boundaries of physics and has moved into so many different things. That makes her very different. My friends, the Ministry of Women and Child Development and Department of Science and Technology this year has instructed all universities and other organizations to felicitate women scientists. Tezpur University also has taken its share of felicitating these women. So we had a young women scientist, Nirmali Gogoi, from our own university, whom we felicitated on 8th of March. Today, we are also going to felicitate Professor B. Madhurima for her contributions to the field of physics. Let me tell you, Professor Madhurima, that our Vice Chancellor, who was hospitalized some time back, he's back again, but he is not well. So he has sent his message, he has expressed his gratitude, and has also asked me that you give us assurance that we will have your physical presence for our future collaborations. So that's there. So he welcomes you. He appreciates your support, and also this team, our GSAT team, Gender Self-Assessment Team, which is the outcome of a Gati project that we are doing on the Department of Science and Technology, also welcomes you today. Professor Madhurima, since we had to, because all of a sudden we started talking about gender in STEM disciplines. This was not there. It's an emergent dimension that we see, that we have started discussing these, because it was very difficult for us in the past to talk about sciences, even in social sciences. We always were very skeptical about discussing these things. But now, since we had disciplines like women's studies or gender studies, which are multidisciplinary in nature, we also see that the quality of these higher education institutions can only, oh, sorry, my video was off.
Yeah.
Okay. The quality of higher educations, depends mainly on the capacities and opportunities that the university actually offers to its people, to its fraternity. In that case, we find, and we also strived for that. We wanted this to bridge this gap between the social sciences and the other sciences, the pure sciences. And this is, I think, science is important. We understand humanity is also important at the same time. And gender is only about fair treatment. It's nothing, it has nothing to do with, not understanding it. That's why when I was talking about this compulsory course in the STEM disciplines regarding gender that we had discussed, that why is that we do not discuss this? Why is because this will also rather, bring in this issue of inclusion. So inclusion itself has a lot of challenges, in terms of recruitment, in terms of, say, opportunities, advancement, leadership. So many things are going to come in this. So we started with all this. Professor Madhurima, it's for your information that we started with the gender profile of the institution first. Then we started with the gender profile of the departments. And we found that there were some of the departments, like for the example, the Department of Energy in the last 25 years did not have even a single female staff. So this is now, becoming very conscious. We are becoming a little conscious, that too after 25 years, but it's never too late. That we know now the real picture, and this sensitization, rather, I would say, is important. We shouldn't be late now. So this was actually a kind of a kind of a trouble, a kind of a, I would say it was a kind of a stones were rattling in my belly, that why social science always has to talk about social sciences and not sciences as for that matter. So we had taken up this project, and while we took up this project, we had a lot of questions raised by DST for that matter. That how is that you're going to collect the data? How is that you're going to do the qualitative or the quantitative data? So we thought of a lot of methodologies for doing that. And we had to constitute this GSAT team, gender self-assessment team, because they are the representatives of these particular departments. They are science departments, they are technology departments, and other. So, and these GSAT members also need to have an extensive understanding and evaluation of institutional policies, processes, procedures, ongoing activities, everything. So I think your talk today, if it's followed by some interaction, it's good. On the organizational climate and the gender climate in an institution will also give them some rich insights. I will request Dr. Ivy Demari to kindly give a brief bio sketch of Dr. Madhurima.
Good morning, ma'am, and good morning to all. Dr. V. Madhurima has graduated from Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, with MSc in Physics and PhD in Physics. She studied weak hydrogen bonds for her PhD with emphasis on microwave dielectric spectroscopy. Her research interest has grown into study of wetting, hydrophobic surfaces, milk colloids, and microwave diathermy. She has extensive teaching and research experience and has also executed research projects. She has guided MSc, IMSc, and PhD research works and takes summer interns also.
So this was a short bio that we collected from the website. And along with that, Professor Madhurima has many more things to add, which will come during the discussion. I will request Nigar Sultana to kindly read the memento. We would like to felicitate. Had it been a physical presence, it would have been very warming, but I will request Nigar to kindly do that. Your voice is not there, Nigar.
A very good morning to all of you. I welcome Professor V. Madhurima. Ma'am, we look forward to have you in the university someday very soon. And I would also like to thank our head, Madhurima Goswami ma'am, for giving me the opportunity to read out the memento. Thank you so much, ma'am. I shall read out the memento now. In appreciation to Professor V. Madhurima, Chandralpa Soikyani Center for Women's Studies, Tejpur University, acknowledges your contribution and scholarship in the field of physics. You have marked a series of exceptional footprints through your achievements. Your creativity and sense of bridging the gap between the scientific world and the real world of experience is enlightening. A role model for the women in the field of sciences, your life is a clear reflection of your efforts, hard work, and unwavering determination. You have instilled in the young women a spirit of excellence in the field of science. Tejpur University salutes your vision, commitment, and dedication. You will be an inspiration for generations in future. Thank you.
So this is something, Professor Madhurima, from Tezpur University. We will be sending this to you. It has been framed, and we will do a courier. I will take your address and we'll send it. So next is, we will switch on to Professor Madhurima. I think all the GSET members have already joined. A few more are going to join. So we will not waste time and will request Professor Madhurima to kindly start with her.
Thank you. I am overwhelmed by your warmth and hospitality and for the felicitation. I'm truly honored to be accepting the same. It's been a long while since I've been to Tezpur University. I'm truly looking forward to coming back there. I really enjoyed my short stay I had for a couple of days when I was visiting. I could see a vision in the Tezpur University being built. And every time I have seen it ranking high up in the national ranking, I would just tell my colleagues here that I understand why. Because I'll tell you, I'll give you a very simple example. Because very often we say that the devil is in the details. In the guest house, the place where the hanger for the clothes was placed, is at a lower level such that even if you dry something, it's not seen out. I mean, that speaks volumes to me, the eye to the last detail. And to me, that's what Tezpur University stands for, or at least that's the impression it left on me. So yes, it's a promise that I'll be there. I'm deeply honored and I'm looking forward to it. I should also say that I was with Mizoram University for 5.5 years. So the Northeast is extremely close to my heart, not just in terms of geography, but in terms of people and its problems, especially of the women, because I have seen things at close quarters, and it means a lot. So without much ado, let me just go on to say what I wanted to say.
Yes.
I was expecting a mixed crowd, so there's a lot of my initial part of the talk might be repetitive for those of you from cultural studies, but just give me, time to set up the foundation on which I want to speak. And as you were saying, Professor Goswami, I think a lot would actually evolve when we have a discussion. So I'll try to quickly go through the slides because I think it's fairly understandable about what I'm saying. So if I have your permission, can I start my presentation?
Yes, yes. And Professor Madhurima, we have mainly people from sciences and technology. So you won't find social science people today in this crowd.
Oh, okay. So can you see my screen? And
yes, yes,
okay,
yes.
Wonderful. So that's me. And broadly, my agenda for today is the following, which is that I'll be speaking on some general issues that are related to the idea of gender sensitization, and speak about, does gender really matter when we talk of science, and how to institutionalize these mechanisms for gender equity. What are the lessons we learned from CUTN? I would like to share some of it with you, and then some lessons from the pandemic, which are actually heartwarming because I think it gives us some hope. So that's the broad idea of my talk for today. So what are the general issues that are faced? It's the leaky pipeline. There is the severe gender stereotyping. There are biases, and there is intersectionality. To me, these are the four main issues that one needs to address when you talk about gender in sciences, or actually gender in higher education, whether it is in sciences, social sciences, or across all the platforms. The leaky pipeline, as we all understand, is where you have a large number of women entering into the education system. All the way up to PhD, it's almost 50-50, 50% of women and 50% of men. But by the time it comes to this last end, which is like professors, leadership roles, and awards and recognition, it's a trickle. And women seem to be trickling out of the system constantly. And if you add intersectionalities to it, and I'll be discussing a bit about the intersectionality, gender minorities or religion minorities, so on and so forth, this number becomes very, very small. A good example of that would be the number of fellows of Indian science academies. Women are very, very few, and even among women, if you look at the intersectionalities, it's countable on a single hand. It's that bad, right? So one of the examples that I have seen is this from Ontario University's leaky pipeline, where they have found that their engineering graduates, not only is there a trickle down, but there is a part at which graduates from an engineering program actually move out of academia and into professions. So of late, there is a belief that the leaky pipeline model, which most of us are very familiar with, might not be the right way to be looking at it. Maybe there is a different model that we need to see, which is, I think right now the UNESCO has released a book a few days ago on the Braided River, the women scientists in India. Here, what they say is the career path of a woman, like that of a river, is course changing. There are multiple sources of entry of water, of whatever you mean by water, to the system, whatever nourishes it, multiple sources of erosion, yet it moves forward, all the while changing tracks, intervening with itself, with other systems, and going back and forth. This model is very interesting because women just don't drop off from the workforce when they get married, or even when we say that woman gets a PhD in sciences but is not seen as a professor, it's not very often, it's not like she just vanishes from the workforce. She's just relocated herself into something else which is conducive for her. So that needs to be taken into account. And by the way, this picture is also here because just to tell you where I am, I'm somewhere out there close to Tanjore in the Kaveri Delta region. So this is a picture of where I am from. So let's quickly look at biases. Now, fair warning to anybody from the sciences who has not done or heard of these before. I'm summarizing a lot of things into my talk. Each one of them needs a complete study. So it's just to give you a flavor for what these are. One of the innate biases that women face is that if you are a woman who's working alone, the name that's given to you is that you're not a team player. If it's a male who's working alone, he's treated as an independent thinker. And if you work in a group, the man is a team leader. And if it's a woman, it's like, oh, her work, she's just there because the work was actually done by others. So it's a lose-lose situation. There is no winning in these arguments. You might ask me, is this just a rhetoric or is this just a theoretical model? I was the first female professor, or actually female faculty among all the departments in CUTN, and remained the only permanent female faculty for many years. At Mizoram University, I was the only female in sciences for a very long time, some 2-3 years, and this is across all science disciplines, earth sciences, life sciences. Like, it's only later that they picked up. So it's not rare to see these comments. But to me, then this one cuts very close to my heart because I suffer this, which is the socialization gap. Men tend to have huge networks, whereas women are people who like to work in isolation for one reason or the other. And the example of Rosalind Franklin versus Watson and Crick is very famous in the discovery of DNA. Rosalind Franklin was working all by herself, and unfortunately, I mean, that story is very well known, and you should go back and read it if you don't. It's only after she passed away that they realized that she had almost cracked the code of the DNA. But she was just working by herself, writing her notes and not working with anyone. Watson and Crick, on the other hand, were extremely sociable. They went across corridors, asked the other scientists what they were doing, and they picked up ideas. This, I think, is a huge problem when it comes to women. Not only because of the shyness, but I think we just have too much of work. Like, at the end of a day, you are thinking more of going back to your family and working for the family than maybe going out, for a drink with your colleagues. It actually begins to hurt at some point because a lot of professional connections are through these socializations, both professional, both academic and non-academic. So this is something we need to train ourselves to start participating in. Also, when it comes to women in decision-making roles, there are a lot of biases. So there is this nice study which shows that both men and women react negatively if the criticism comes from a woman. They said that if you're criticized by a woman, it led to a larger reduction in job satisfaction. People felt unhappy if they were criticized by a woman than by a man. They were also doubly disinterested in working for a company in the future if they had been criticized by a female boss. And this is, for both men and women. So there is an inbuilt implicit bias that runs in all of us with respect to gender, that you don't mind taking orders from men, but you definitely mind taking orders and criticism from a woman. And that is what actually starts to create the glass ceiling at some level. Even if men or the rules allowed you to, go to the last destination, the biases will stop you from doing so, whether it is within your head or in the head of the people that you're working with. And these need to be addressed if you want to create an equitable work environment anywhere. And then there are the gender stereotyping and issues related to that. The gender stereotypes, I don't even want to get started on it because the number of stereotypes that one faces, like just me, for example, either the first thing they ask is, how many children are you married? What's your husband? Can you cook? That's been the first question that many people have asked me. And if I say no to all of them, then it's like, oh, you're arrogant, you don't fit into our group, so on and so forth. So nobody actually gives you a chance to establish yourself. Male dominated cultures, I think I don't have to say much about it. And two people from the Northeast, because having lived there, we know what it is. There are implicit patriarchal values that run everywhere. It exists everywhere, even in the state that I am in. But that dictates how you behave, and that dictates the decisions that you make. The simplest is, if you have a conference, immediately the idea of being at the reception or serving is given to the girls. And nobody seems to mind that. The problem is like, it's both ways. People who are giving those orders are also not sensitive, and those who are taking it also don't seem to mind. It's only when we start thinking and then doing that, if you enjoy, do it, otherwise don't. So it's a much bigger issue, but that also leads to things in sciences such as math anxiety. There are these beautiful studies which have been done, which show that girls don't think that they can't do math. In a classroom, they had conducted this test and asked the boys and the girls whether the girls can do math. The girls said, yes, girls can do math. The girls said, yes, I can do math. That is, they were pretty sure about themselves and the other girls. The boys said, no, the girls can't do math. So the problem is not in the head of the girls. The women don't really need to be fixed. It's the system that needs to be fixed around them. But this, slowly, there is this whole Panchatantra story of a man walking with a goat on his shoulders. And as he's walking, people tell him, oh, you have a dog on your shoulders. And after some time, he actually begins to believe it's a dog and lets go of the goat. That is what happens when you are constantly criticized that you have a confidence gap. You end up losing confidence in yourself, and the other side becomes extremely overconfident, to the point that it translates into microaggressions. Microaggressions are people not knowing your name, not pronouncing it the right way, not giving an eye contact when speaking to a woman, especially interrupting a female speaker in conferences. In sciences, we see this a lot. Or trying to talk as if the woman doesn't know her subject, whereas the male knows. These are from my personal experience. I'm not generalizing. I have faced this, and I'm just sharing that with you. And subjecting an individual to more criticism and harder judgment, all these become microaggressions. It happens in simple ways like saying, oh, I didn't know you spoke such good English. I didn't know that you could do good math. Why wouldn't you think I have the same degree as you do? One look and there's already the aggressive tone that happens. Now, when I discuss this with my male colleagues, they keep saying, stuff that are said of women, being unmarried, not having a child, whatever be the personal comments that happen. They say that this happens to us too. We too are criticized. So what are you making a big noise about? But the fact is, they are criticized in the background, whereas women face it in a meeting, in a official meeting, they are told to their face. In a setting of profession, they are told to their face. Whereas the gossip that happens to the men is usually hush. It's in the background. They're not the same. They're definitely not the same. And then the same mindset about the bias and the cultural bias is seen in this lovely infographic, which talks about married fathers not losing anything when they enter into a tenure track. This is, of course, with reference to the US, or achieving tenure, that is permanent job, entry into something like a guest faculty position and then a permanent position. If you're a single woman, your chances of tenure track are much higher, but achieving tenure, the leaky pipeline begins. If you're married, then even getting a tenure track is very, very low. Being tenured is only 27% of what a man can achieve. Because inherently it's believed that a mother cannot be contributing to the workforce. Now, there are rules in India, speaking of Gati, because this is one of the focuses of this talk. Not just Gati, but in India, we have these rules which are supposedly there to help women, like childcare leave, or you can migrate your PhD if your spouse moves. But instead of actually helping the women, they end up being detrimental to the progress of the women, because since this option is available, the woman is expected to take it. So she's expected to move wherever her partner moves. She's expected to take the childcare leave of 2 years, while the partner, if just imagine if both the partners are working in a university. One person loses 2 years completely, whereas the other person does not. And that also affects their career, because when you go for a promotion, you're asked for your papers. They don't ask you, how much of your leave you have taken. And also we know that, sitting at home for 2 days means that you stop thinking of work. Imagine having that break. There has been a request by many, of course, it's not come out, to make childcare leave and this migration a gender-free availability. It should not matter whether you are a mother or a father. So long as you're a parent, you should be given that, childcare leave, so on and so forth. So instead of fixing the problem for the women, some of these rules seem to be actually adding to their problems. A lot of us have personally found that the lack of role models is one of the major blocks when it comes to younger women. That is a typical opinion that people have, is that a girl can only reach to a certain level, and of course men can go wherever, to whatever heights they want to. There is also this idea that there should be a perfect work-life balance when it comes to a woman, that she should be the super mom and superwoman and being at the workplace. The girl herself might have completely different dreams for herself. And when this young girl who wants to fly high does not know in which direction to fly or who she can look up to, the only places she looks up to are these stereotypes that are given to her by the society. And that is where we really need role models. And here, because especially since this is the Department of Cultural Studies, and in the Northeast, I know that there is a huge culture of oral history. People are recording it for the last few decades, but yes, the art of storytelling. You need to tell stories about the achievers. I was very, very happy to receive this document about Chandraprabha Saikyani, because she was a trailblazer in her own way. And when you hear of those stories, you get some strength from within. And when it comes to women in sciences, I have a few recommendations for all of you. One is, of course, the Life and Times of Kamala Bhagavat Sohni, talking about how many difficulties she faced in getting herself a master's program in Indian Institute of Science under Professor C.V. Raman. Of course, there is Leelavati's Daughters, which is the biography of many women scientists, followed by A Girl's Guide to a Life in Science. Again, Dispersed Radiance by Abha Sood is a very interesting article, and I would strongly urge all of you to read it to understand where women in science have come from in this country, and what are the advantages we have, and where we can take it forward. The last is my personal favorite, which is Fragmented Feminism, The Life and Letters of Anandibai Joshi, who herself lived only up to the age of 23. She was the first first Indian woman to win a medical degree. But unfortunately, she passed away at the early age of 23. What is interesting to me for this particular book is that the letters were collected and collated by Meera Kosambi, who herself was a feminist, and then re-edited by Professor Ram Swami Madhuri and Abhan. So these are books I think I can give as a recommendation for women in sciences if anybody is interested in learning about the history. But telling the stories of these role models becomes very, very important. The other problem is, do we actually have, yes, it's one thing to have a role model, but do we have somebody who can give you a helping hand when you need that hand? So do we, as women, do we actually pull the other woman up? This is the week of the Women's Day, and I think we all need to celebrate each other. You know, we need to start celebrating each other's smallest of achievements, and be happy that our fellow sisters are actually achieving something instead of feeling bad. Because one of the problems that it's just psychological at some level. When you struggle hard to reach a level and you reach it, you're too tired to either celebrate somebody or help somebody. And I think that is where it is important for us to continue to keep the fight going on. There are times when I ask myself, do I need to speak anymore? I'm old enough. But no, I mean, now I speak not for myself, but for the younger women until they can pick up the baton and start running themselves. So I think this whole idea of this, I won't call it a sisterhood, because there are plenty of gender sensitized men who are the support system for many of us. But I think we should just start celebrating each other, whether it is a man or a woman or the other genders. It doesn't matter who it is. We need to be there in it together. A collaborative effect is something that will be much more effective. That said, we need to speak of gender and not of women. And this is something I was very, very happy when I was in Mizoram, because we did have gender minorities and they were accommodated into the hostels. I see a much more broad-minded attitude, in places like Manipur or in Mizoram. It's time for us to openly acknowledge that gender is not a binary, that it falls on this Gaussian spectrum, and there's an overlap of the spectrum, and you can have any gender. And today, throughout my talk, whenever I say women, please replace it with gender minorities, because women and gender minorities, because we all exist, including the agendered. So we need to take care of intersectionalities. One is gender, the other is geography, because where I see Tezpur University having a huge role to play is in understanding the geographical issues that are related to women, from the Northeast section. Because there are different gender roles, there are different responsibilities, there are communities which are still matrilinear. So the responsibility of the women is much more. Access to resources. And like I said, I know what it means to be living in a state where you're not sure if you'll get rice, you'll get milk, because the arterial road is blocked either due to natural calamities or because there is a political unrest. Having been there, I really know firsthand what these are. I did not have access to books to read beyond the standard textbooks. The geography, this is because in the Northeast, I know that if I was ever asked, I would be asked, how far is Guwahati from Aizawl? And I would say 14 hours. Space is measured in time, because that's how we look at things in the Northeast. We can't tell you how many kilometers. It would take us 2.5 hours to travel 15 kilometers. So those sensitizations need to happen, that, it's not the same. Because every small achievement of a woman in the Northeast, I think this actually has to be magnified by 2 or 3 times, because it's so much more difficult for her. Of course, the time zones, time travels, so on and so forth, but also the rural versus urban divide that happens. Like, I'm now in a rural area. Here, the problems are completely different. Access to funding, Northeast has an advantage in that sense, that if you apply from Northeast, at least there's a probability that you get more funding. I had once written an article for Confluence on my experiences of being a woman physicist in Mizoram, which is available on Indian Academy of Sciences website. So you can read that for a personal narrative. So quickly moving over, why does it matter whether there are women in STEM or not? Because science is, after all, objective, it's rational. So why should it matter whether the person doing it is a woman or a man? I'll just give you 2 examples to this. One is this Chinese Nobel Prize winner, Yo-Yo Tong, who won a Nobel Prize for extracting a particular anti-malarial compound based on her traditional knowledge of medicine, Chinese medicine. And that traditional knowledge was given down to her because she was a woman. And so when women come into the sciences, they are able to give a different perspective to science. Another such example is the case of the bird song. Historically, it was believed that birds would sing because the male was trying to attract the female. And then over the last few years, they realized that there are plenty of papers which said that female birds also sing to attract the male. And when somebody did this study, I've given you the reference there, they found that the first author on all the, on many of these papers which were talking about the female bird song were women themselves. So when women came into the workforce of STEM, they started questioning this whole attitude that it's only the male birds that sing. They said, why don't the female birds sing? Now, as people from the cultural studies, I think you will see how layered this is. It's about the male mindset. It's about how science is perceived. It's everything about how, all the medicine that's done is with reference to a male body, male proportions, male rats, so on and so forth. And also about sexuality, because it's believed that women will not make an effort to attract. I think this particular research is very telling. Of course, we still have the gender gap in India, and the earning capacities across the world are also pretty low for women. And so we have a need to talk about women in STEM. I will not go to details of this. So quickly going through how we can institutionalize these practices and moving on to Gati. Gati has this entire charter which says that we would like to have equal opportunity and nurturing of talent and so on and so forth for STEM. And the documents are available, and since you have a working group, I think they would be sensitizing you. But to practically implement any of these, we need to look at each one of these: recruitment, opportunities, advancement, recognition, representation, resources, safety, dignity, and leadership. That is, when you have a team that's trying to implement a gender equitable campus, you need to ensure that there is gender equity in all these aspects that are highlighted in purple. And here again, I would urge you to go think beyond the man-woman binary and look at gender minorities. And the ones in reds are the dissipative forces, the ones which take away from achieving gender equity, which are stereotypes, biases, gender roles, cultural barriers, so on and so forth. So you do have a large work in front of you, because you need to balance these two to be able to actually make a campus gender equitable. Some of these I'll be discussing in the next, and we can have a discussion about the rest. Coming to physics itself, the Gender in Physics Working Group, which is a part of the IUPAC's Working Group 5 on gender equity, has this Hyderabad Charter, which was prepared in the year 2019. And there are some guiding principles that have been, this is a charter which has been circulated and has been signed by many eminent physicists and by administrative directors of many institutes. And they promise to uphold these on their campus. It's a promise right now. It's not a rule. And here there are many things I would urge you to go back and read about the gender charter. There are intervention strategies to ensure gender equity, but there are also demands for things like having childcare facilities at every conference for both men and women, so that the participation could be much more, so on and so forth. So the gender equity is being worked on within the physics group through this Gender in Physics Working Group, of which I am a member at the national level. Current environment in all institutes of higher education in India in general is, when we talk of gender equity, they talk of having an ICC, of a gender sensitization unit, having gender champions among the students, so on and so forth, that they have very good maternity rules, and they might even have a good childcare center, etc. But in most institutes, we do not have gender-specific policies in resource allocation, in recruitment, whether or not we have mandatory essential facilities such as daycare centers, sick rooms in every building, so on and so forth. So I think at some level we are all doing lip service. All of us are guilty of this. I mean, I think without exception. But when you start thinking of how to make a system equitable, you really need to go beyond the first two and then start actually addressing the questions that matter. So what measures can we take? Because that's, at the end of the day, that's what it boils down to. One good thing that I have found, one interesting example, and I wish I could implement it here, but maybe you can do it far more easily, is to have something called a feedback coaching. That is, you train the faculty and the administrators to concentrate on the content of the feedback rather than who says it, so that the criticism is taken in a very positive manner. Also have bias training, especially for internal biases, especially before recruitments, so that people are very aware of their biases. I will not mention which university, but one university in the Northeast had this problem that administrative staff, when approached for a relieving order by two people, did not relieve one person because she was a woman and a tribal woman. Whereas the other person was, the procedure was much faster. We need to ensure that such biases don't kick in into the daily workspace, that they do not affect the recruitment process being made. Because imagine if this person, instead of being administrative staff, was actually sitting on the recruitment board. They wouldn't be taking in a whole bunch of people just because they are who they are. This is interesting that women seem to benefit a lot from reference letters from previous employers. So if you are in a position to give a reference letter to any woman in your life, please do so, in the right way. There's no need to exaggerate, but please give an honest reference letter because it seems to make a difference. Have a diversity officer on every recruitment to ensure that diversity is taken into account. And the last one, I don't know how it's going to happen because world over, this is a problem. Whenever somebody works for equity, their work is not valued. Like, for example, I had to work a lot for the girls on my campus because when I joined CUTN, we were 82% girls students. And like I said, I was the only female faculty. So everything from toilets to their hygiene to everything was taken care. But the end of it, when it comes to your own promotion, it's like, what did you do for your research? Equity work is not appreciated. And if you can encourage your administration through the Gati to actually start valuing equity work, I think that will go a long way in people volunteering to take this work up. The other thing which I did mention was to catch them young and give them enough information and training. So as a part of that, we run this program called PAUSE, which we have also run for Tezpur University's physics department, which is called the Program for Aspiring Women Scientists. This is done by Vandana Nanal, Deepachari and me. This idea is not to fix the women, but just to tell them that they have these inner strengths and there are these biases, and when they encounter a microaggression of any kind, it's not their fault, because immediately women tend to feel that, oh, it's my, so I must have done something wrong. It might be just that the other person is extremely biased. So we do that training. I have personally benefited from bystander intervention, where when somebody, like I said, I was introduced, and the first thing the other professor said was, oh, do you cook? Men around me actually started saying, she's such a good physicist, she is doing this, she is doing that the whole thing got diffused. The bystander effect, as many of you are aware, is when something wrong is happening, especially with gender issues, we tend to think that somebody else will look into it, saying like, it's not really my problem, he or she will be okay, I'm busy with something else, so on and so forth. I think we need to really start having an intervention whenever we see it, and it would be nice if you can have a systematic approach to bystander effect in bystander intervention on your campus. How do you call out the biases? Can you speak on the behalf of somebody being deliberately neglected, like in a conference or in a meeting, if a person's voice is not being heard? Can you say, shall we listen to so and so? Gently deflect, like the example, my personal example I quoted. report it maybe to the ICC, but also develop bystander intervention strategies for the entire university, and that would go a long way. So quickly moving on to some of the lessons learned from us, which will also tell you how to implement. We found that addressing safety and security, we did a gender audit, and this is the conclusion of the audit. Address safety and security concerns, including sanitation and transport. These two seem to be of very high importance when it comes to women, sanitation and transport. Please have training programs for administrators and those who are going to be sitting on recruitment, not to ask illegal questions such as, what does your husband do? How many children do you have? How do you feel about not having children? These are highly insensitive questions, and once a woman's mind is upset about it, she might underperform at the interview. And that, I think, we really need to start speaking quite loudly about. Ensure credits for equity work. This all of us are suffering. This, unfortunately, apparently, when a woman takes childcare leave, she is also expected to work from home. You know, oh, just this. Why don't you spend an hour and do this? Well, I think you know where I'm going with this. Please bias train all. Teach everybody not to moral police or comment about a woman's attire or her status, or this is in the now point number 5 is with respect to her everyday campus life. Point number 2 is with specific reference to recruitments. Introduce gender equity into the curriculum. In physics, we have this whole idea that when you're giving these word examples, especially when we say that there are these two people and they're looking at each other. This is in relativity, we do this a lot. A is standing on a platform, B is in a train. Previously, it used to be there are these two men and you talk, but slowly, world over, they say no, one female, one male. So the everyday language in your classrooms can be modified to include gender sensitization. So you can replace Alice and Bob. I usually use Indian names, but I also make it a point of using female examples so that you somehow subtly start telling that women do belong to STEM. Ensure good health services on campus for all so that they can take on their roles as caregivers without stress. Not just for women, because there are enough men who are taking care of children, but ensure that that is there. Childcare support, this is something that we have also asked as a part of the Hyderabad Charter. Ensure effective, safe and judgment-free redressal mechanism for gender harassment issues. ICCs are in place, but again, very often we have them being headed or being, the panel is not as sensitive as it should be, especially, in my opinion, especially to the gender diversity that exists, like the diversity within the gender that exists. And please run as many programs as you can, whether it's programs or courses on gender justice, rights of women, so on and so forth, because many of us are not aware of what rights we have within the legal framework of either the university or at the national level. The last part I'll just quickly go on to before we can actually discuss are some of the lessons that we learned from pandemic and how it's useful. Previously, we had this whole sense of a dual space. That's workspace is different from home space. 9 to 5 work, 5 to 9 work, home space. Pandemic has taught us that these two overlap. And while work from home might not have been an option for all, especially if you didn't have the devices or the data network, the flexi timing seems to be feasible, and it has actually accounted for more work being done from home, especially for women who were not, who didn't have to be too worried about the caregiving aspect of their lives, whether it was their elderly at home or the children. Clearly, we seem to be capable of lesser paperwork and lesser chain of higher authorities. During the pandemic, we all worked pretty well. Teachers adapted to the pandemic and did their duty with minimal to no institutional support, and most of us were conscientious enough to do our job without having to be monitored. So there is really no need for this paperwork trail that seems to be working around. This is a good time to use it. Integrating technologies with higher education, there is a statistics to show, at least from some of the institute, including CUTN, that more women were called to give invited talks. And because these were online, more women participated. So we had this UPAP Gender and Physics conference recently, a few months ago, and this was based in Australia. The number of international women participants, especially from underdeveloped and developing countries, was much higher than ever in history of the conference. That was because it was online. Women were willing to wake up at 2 in the night or 4 in the morning to attend the conference, but because it was online, they were able to attend. This is something we should actually, if we can make almost all our events a hybrid event, you will have more women participating and benefiting. See, it doesn't matter whether they're actually participating in the sense of interacting, but even being given a chance to listen in would do wonders to many of them. And of course, better gender diversity and participation of some differently abled. More gender diverse people came out and they were able to participate. There are records of it, and now we are having more and more gender minorities being recruited into STEM, and they are also open about their identities, which is a very, very healthy sign. And along with Professor Ram Ramaswamy, we had this discussion forum for online teaching all through the pandemic, just to help fellow faculty move to online teaching. And one of our panel discussions was on disabilities. And we got to hear that people with both mental health and certain mobility disorders benefited from having online classes. The teachers themselves, both the teachers and the students, but teachers more specifically. So it would be good to keep all these in mind when we go back to frame policies for Gati at all levels, whether it's recruitment or in their progress or at any level. And since now we know that we can do with breaking the hierarchical rules of paperwork and hierarchies, I think it's a high time we take this lesson forward, and before people forget that this is possible and go back to the good old methods, make use of it. The pandemic has shown us that Institute of Higher Learning are capable of sweeping changes, flexi timings, less paperwork, flexi credits, ensuring access to all. And there is no reason for us to stop being reasonable just because the pandemic has hopefully ended. It looks like the pandemic has ended, touch wood, and I would like to see it that way. But let us try and keep this going. Right. Every drop counts when we are trying to fix a leaky pipeline, and every action counts when we are trying to ensure that our universities are equitable campuses. Thank you very much. A lot of the work that I have quoted is from the gender studies that we did on my campus. And this is the last suggestion I would have, is that when you have your Gati's steering committee, I benefited a lot from the diversity within my group itself, which was Sangeeta is from the Department of Law. So she was looking out for the legal aspect of everything intuitively. Chitra was from social work, and she was bringing in the gender sensitivity to the entire data. Vijayalakshmi from statistics was bringing in the statistical analysis, so the very analytical mind to the entire program. So when we started preparing the report, we realized that this diversity of the people on the panel itself made a difference to the way we started looking at it. That's a picture of us enjoying the Women's Day recently. And thank you all, and specifically to Professor Madhurima Goswami for this opportunity to be sharing with you. I'd love to have a discussion.
Thank you, Professor Madhurima. Since we are namesakes, all the time I keep on saying Madhurima. It's like, I feel so uncomfortable,
You can call me Madhu. I'm pretty open to that.
Okay. Without wasting much time, let's go back to our participant GSAT members and some of the students from sciences and technology who are there along with us to immediately start interaction. I think Barnali Chaudhary, she has raised a hand. Barnali?
Good morning, ma'am.
Yes.
Good morning.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Thank you, ma'am, for the beautiful presentation. I really loved the points you said. Like now, because of the hybrid mode, women can join anytime from anywhere. It really touched me. And what I would like to say that some more training on the same line, if could be arranged in future, I think will be more beneficial for us. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
I completely agree with you, Bernali. One realization that all of us have, and I think Professor Goswami will agree with me, all of us need to be trained. Like, the scientists need to be trained in the social science aspect of it, the psychology aspect of it. The social scientists need to pick up the actual problems of women in STEM or, analytical methods of data analysis. So all of us have a learning process. And unless we are open to this learning for ourselves, we will not be able to create a better environment for the next generation. So I think the pandemic has also shown us that teachers need to become students again.
Yes, true, very true, very true.
Yes, yes. We have Dr. Biplab.
Yes, Dr.
We
Biplab.
have Dr. Biplab Sarkar.
Good morning, madam. Am I audible clearly?
Yes.
Yes.
So, ma'am, thank you very much for your excellent talk. And I completely agree with you that online conferences have helped us very much because in physical conferences, we spend a lot of time traveling. As well as one more issue is that since the conferences have been online, many good talks are now available over YouTube so that we can revisit them at our convenience. Another issue, ma'am, regarding gender. So right now I'm guiding a PhD student who is a girl. Okay. So
You're
now,
from which department, sir?
sir, ma'am, I'm from Applied Sciences Department. I'm physics. I'm from physics.
Okay.
Now, in previous meeting, also in the GSET meeting, also I had mentioned that for me, a student, I see as a student irrespective of the gender. Okay,
Right.
but I understand that a girl student will have some special needs which I should be able to take care of. The other issue is that I want my student, irrespective of the gender, to become independent. Okay, so in that sense, so I during my interaction, I share my personal experiences so that in future, after the PhD, she's supposed to become an independent researcher. All right. So now the thing is, sometimes I need to be strict. I mean, in some respects, if she's not able to get something, so that but do you think that there's a thin line difference between
I understand.
that, since she's a girl, am I becoming aggressive?
No, I can actually answer this question because I have plenty of male friends, and this is a discussion we always have. I would say that a couple of things. First of all, thank you for being a sensitized mentor to a girl student, because women need that. So first of all, thanks for that sensitivity on your part. Yes, we would be wrong in not acknowledging that there is the other end of the spectrum where women are misusing the rules, misusing their femininity. There is that fear also that comes, with having a female student, and we are well aware that that end of the spectrum exists. It would be wrong on my part not to acknowledge that. Having said that, how should a male faculty interact? This is a question that we get asked very often. I have a few tips, like if you can call them that. One is encourage the girls to say no, and that their no will be heard. So if they say, sir, not today, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Maybe you say, okay, maybe if you're not well, but be very firm with the overall, the flexi timing part of it. That is, let them say no, let them say that not happening right now, but then you be very firm with the goalposts. There's no need for you to shift the goalpost, that the work has to be done. Oh, you don't want to do it now, fine, but come back to me with this result before tomorrow evening. So the woman finds a voice to say that, yes, I have the choice of saying no. Or if somebody doesn't want to work on a project, so that no has to be heard. That's number one. Number two, I found a problem that existed when I came to, since everybody's from presumably from Northeast, you will understand. In Mizoram, there is a very physical culture. Like, I could just put my hand around a male student and speak to them, and it was just normal for all of us. And I come here and the culture, this is a culture I grew up in, but then that itself came as something new to me again. Furthermore, there is a rural Tamil Nadu culture, and this is why I said geography matters, where somehow the students have been taught to go and stand right next to the teacher and speak to them. And to me, it was very, very awkward because the girls, we have an integrated master's program, and the girls were just out of their school, and I'm like, I was cringing in my seat when I was seeing this. For no reason, because there was discomfort on both sides. So the simplest thing is training the students to stand on the other side of the table. Keeping your door open if you have a single female student coming in, only to say that, look, my place is a safe place. You can walk out anytime you want. This seems to be a tip that has helped my younger male colleagues. Right. Because they have actually come back and thanked me for it, saying now we make it a rule that if it's a single female, keep the door open. Just leave the door open, man. Nothing. You don't have to make it sound very dramatic. Just leave the door open and have a conversation. If a girl cries, and I know this is a huge problem with, male mentors, because the woman there starts to weep and you don't know what to do. Ask her to leave. This is what I do. I say, I'm not going back on what I said. Collect your emotions, come back to me with a friend, because from now on, I'll speak in front of a friend who will be the third witness to this entire conversation. You're not going to accuse me of anything. You don't have to say any of this. You just say, come back with your friend so that you'll feel comfortable. Go, finish crying, collect your emotions. When you're strong enough to hear the criticism, come back, but bring a friend along. Small things like this will restore the faith in the woman that she can be heard, she will be heard without the fear of reprimand, because she is picking the friend whom she's going to bring. It could be a male, it could be a female, it could be anybody. It saves you a lot of trouble, and it keeps the entire environment healthy. So I would say let the person, and also please understand that women speaking up is a huge issue. For every one word they speak, especially at the younger age, she must have a conflict in her head for 5 minutes. Don't stifle that voice. If somebody wants to say something, let them bring it out. Just encourage them to speak. Ma'am, I hope you agree with me, because you're muted. You're on mute.
Yes, very much, Professor Madhurima. And what happens is in the sciences or maybe technology, we have these laboratories, and you have these long working hours. So normally a girl student, she is also expected to stay back, because there is you have to complete an experiment, you have to write a paper, you have to work with your supervisor. All these in the last few years has created a lot of problems. Right, because there are some weak moments, I would say. I'm very explicitly I'm putting it.
I
Because
agree.
we had such problems in the past.
Ma'am,
Right.
this is... Yeah.
That is exactly what I'm saying, that what needs to be done. You cannot ask your girl students to, just complete their university hours and, say that you get back to the hostels, only the boys can do the experiments. You cannot say like that, because they have the same curricula, they have the same course, and they need to finish it in the same time also. So that is one problem that's, that is there.
My lab, being an experimental physics lab, one of the rules I have is, and actually this is across my department, that research scholars or anybody working at night will not work alone. So we said, bring a friend. It could be a friend who's going to sit there and read. It could be somebody from the integrated master's first year. We don't care who you bring, but don't be alone. Of course, we don't talk about these sensitive issues because that's not the thing. We say, look, there could be a short circuit or there could be a fire, or you just need a second person. You're not allowed without a second person. So the moment you have a second person, it diffuses the situation to a large extent. We have had issues. They do come back and say so-and-so is doing something, but that's a different thing. Once you know, you tackle the problem. But by ensuring that there is a second person, a lot of problems can be reduced in the intensity. And in my department, it's a rule that no scholar can be alone in a lab anytime after working hours.
And Professor Madhurima, where do you, so now we can discuss a lot of things, there are 101 things that we need to discuss, there's hardly any time, but where do we put these rules and these regulations? Because some of the people, they would say, though, it's not important for me. So even some women might say, that's not needed.
That is where I believe something like your steering committee is going to be useful. And coming from university system, I understand that having a very democratic method is not going to be, effective all the time. Semi-democratic is what we need, in the sense that if there's a consensus about what could be correct for the system, I think you can give that as a proposal and give these as guidelines for the department, saying, let the department ensure that no single person works at a given time. And these could be broad gender-based guidelines, and that would be helpful. But understanding university systems, requesting people to ensure this is not going to work out. It's better as a rule that comes from above.
Yes. That's something. And see, somewhere we went very wrong, because what we did was, when this awareness and motivation or sensitization thing started, what we did was, we just sent our boys out and we just made, everything available to the girls. So this was what had happened. Now what happens, even during the GSAT, let me tell you, the men, they always have this feeling that it's all about the women in science. What is that I am doing here? So even if it's a HOD or a senior professor or a dean or anybody for that matter, they will always have this feeling in their mind that this is not for us. Why are they making us, why are we a GSAT member? But it's not like that. Being a head of the department or a director of a, say, center, you have the responsibility of looking at this. You must have that eye, you cannot have a blind eye to that.
I made the mistake of doing the sensitization programs for only women. And even with this recent work of ours on pause, we have, to be honest, we have this criticism that why you're running workshop for girls. This workshop is mostly for, overcoming your own internal bias. So we said, look, that's at a different level. So that's not, we're not fixing the system, we're just making her aware. But I completely endorse what you're saying, because this is a huge problem. And world over, wherever there are the gender units of any kind, including our Gender in Physics Working Group or, IUPAP's Working Group 5, it's mandatory to have men on the panel. Now, it's for us to pick the right kind of gender sensitized men who will understand the need to speak up and speak loudly about these issues. They are the ones, very often these things are better received if it comes from a man than from a woman when it comes to policies. So if the men on the GSAT team are sensitized themselves, then they would be able to take it forward. Otherwise, it's going to be a huge issue.
Yes.
So I think identifying these gender sensitized men is important, but we all know who they are. As colleagues, we know who they are.
Yes.
My thing would be like, at least the way I worked at CUTN is I didn't care about the designation. I took on board whoever they were. And it's surprisingly, it's mostly the younger men who are highly sensitized, and especially young fathers. So they seem to be contributing much more in a much more work. They don't mind, just standing up and saying like, this is not how it's done. So
Professor Madhurima, we have Vivek Mehta. Yes, Vivek, please.
So, I just wanted to comment on what Professor Madhurima just said. First of all, thank you, Professor Madhurima. That was quite an interesting talk, because it touches on many aspects of the topic which we are discussing. I would not say women topic, but very beautifully you put up it's about any kind of minority, I would say. And one has to be sensitive about that. I just want to add to what you were just saying, that people who are, let's say, young father, or let's say young father of a daughter, I think they would be more, in a way, they should be or would be more sensitive. What I'm saying is that, and these kinds of training programs, I think it is quite necessary for the people who are right now in any organization are sitting at the top. Most of them will be men, first of all, but it is very important that they go through such discussion, let me say, not just presentations, but discussion, and the kind of things we need in day-to-day basis. I'll give you an example here. 5 years old, we had a daughter. My wife also teaches here in this university, and from mechanical engineering department, she teaches in sociology. And one of my colleagues, he wished me, and by saying, now listen to me what he said. And he said in Hindi and English mix, he said, कि अच्छा हुआ you now have a child, नहीं तो women wild हो जाता है. And I was so shocked to hear this. Ki senior professor, I would say, okay, he's in this university. I'm saying ki, how to react to it first of all. So I'm saying ki, if and see, he's not just talking about me. He's also talking about her colleague who have just become mother. How that general perception is that women without child is wild. And it absolutely, I just said to him at that point of time, I don't agree with you. But I think that such programs, because the way we react to any issue on our day-to-day basis is important. And such discussions are bringing that thing to fora. And I thank you.
Completely agree, and I understand having, even to date, I suffer from the comments from the senior men in position about the marital status, about not having a child. This is as recent as a few days back to a few weeks back. It's a constant thing, or being called frustrated and all kinds of funny names, which after some time your head scratching and saying, where did this come from? Or what does it have? What relevance is it to what I'm speaking? So I completely agree with what you're saying. And the fact, like I said, is in my experience, the percentage of younger men who are gender sensitized is much more than the older generation, maybe just because it's the environment that they have grown up in. You can't make the older people listen. That's a fact. So no amount of training workshops, they will come, they'll shut their minds, and it's not working.
That's true.
But on the other hand, what can work is when you have mandatory mechanisms such as bias training before recruitment. Taking that examination before you sit on an interview board for recruiting. They would love to sit on the panels where they're recruiting. But if you force them to undergo a bias training, then you're actually forcing them to think. Whether it makes a difference or not, at least you're making them to think for a while. That's one. In my opinion, bias training and having the gender the gender representative on every panel is very, very important. The second way of actually making them hear is if men like you speak up, the bystander intervention, as I called it. If you can stand up and say, don't speak this way, when they hear it from a male, the voice is heard louder. Instead of just the women saying, don't speak of us this way, if you tell your male colleagues, don't speak of them that way, I think it's heard differently. So I totally agree with what you're saying. And to me, these are the only mechanisms that I have realized work, which is forced bias training where it matters to them, which is now at that level, it's typically at recruitment.
Yes, sir. When whoever is interacting, let's say, or interfering in whatever way, let's say recruitment, as you said. First, I was just reading a recruitment notice which has come out recently from a university website. I do not know whether this manpower word is gender neutral or not. Is it?
It's not.
It's not, but it clearly says that anybody can go. The first notice, which is the first or third notice, which is there in the notification, it reads, "We need manpower." And we asked proposal for so people who are sitting at these and making these things.
It's not easy to bring a systemic change, because in my university, even to have a third option for gender on any of the forms, we have been writing and writing and writing, but then when the recruitment forms go out, it's male, female. Because either there is a slight, I would just say there's an insensitivity, they're not looking at it, or there is this just hard, see, the flip side of it, we also know that there's a lot of cutting down of manpower and our workloads have increased. So what is the simplest thing you do? You take a previous document, copy paste onto the new one, without paying attention if you're actually paying attention to the smallest details. And this is again, let me go back to the starting of the conversation where I said I was impressed with Tezpur University's guest house because of that last mile attention. So it's when you start looking at these finer details that you actually know how to fix the system. So yeah, I agree, but I think it's left to all of you to start. Maybe you should write back and say, please ensure that this is not done.
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Vivek. And this is, I think it's already 10:50, and most of these students, I think they have left. We also need, because this is something where we were feeling for this Gati project, we were having a lot of problems, I would say, because 2002-03, we are supposed to submit our first draft of the Smart Action Plan. And we were, the methodology that we had actually infused in was, to have the entire group together, people come speak to them, we have working sessions, and then from that we try to, extract the data. That's sometimes qualitative and at times quantitative also. But the problem was, there was a kind of as I said, they were little detached as to this is not something, this is not my profession, this is not my discipline, we have nothing to do with this. Right, this is still there, but there are some very good people like what Biplov and what Vivek are saying is very correct, but we have very few such gender leaders or gender sensitive people. Right, so that's one big problem, how to bring them. Now, what our next methodology is that we are taking departments, see, we go to the physics department, we talk to a small group of women, we talk to a small group of young researchers and try to inculcate the data, extract the data. Because if you try to collect together all of them, it's easy for us. You call one resource person, one trainer, and you have all these groups, all these disciplines coming in together. So that's exactly what we tried, and we failed. We miserably failed. Because everybody thought when the women are there, and they're very few in number, they thought that it's not for us. All the time the word woman is being uttered,
Ma'am, there are two things that I would like to add to this. One is, at the initial stages of CUTN, when there was a proposal for starting a gender studies department, our then Vice Chancellor was very against it for this very same reason. And I think I see merit to what he says. While I'm invested in the idea or in the principles of gender equity, what he said was exactly this. He says the moment you have a department of gender studies, anything that has got to do with women will be like it goes there, not our problem. He says don't start that so that everybody is participating. Then I was not very impressed, but I think over the years I see the merit to that argument. There is a certain reluctance. I completely agree with what you're saying. The second part, to date, I have not been able to finish my gender audit. For the same reason, there are bottlenecks everywhere. You try to extract data, you don't get it. The way I'm circumventing it is by getting official orders from above. So we send out orders saying within this time span, we need this data, because asking is not helping. The same issues we are also facing. So to me, it's two-pronged. From bottom, you are sensitizing them, and you have to keep doing that in a very sensitive manner. At the same time, start pushing it from the top with a certain amount of pressure. It's only then that you will be able to get anything out of it. It's ma'am, again, it's physics, it's inertia. People will not move from their comfort zone unless you actually force them to move out of that zone. So this, I guess, is a slightly universal problem within the country.
Yes. I think we need to wrap up the session also right now, because some of the people, they have already left. So I will request Professor Madhurima, thank you very much for being here. And I am happy to see that, some of our male members, they also spoke up about their own experiences. And also, like this kind of advocacy is also good, that this is important and this is happening with me, is also good at times. I will request Dr. Ivy Demari to kindly formally offer the vote of thanks.
Before which, I'll just permit me to express my thanks for this interaction and the session. I hope the sharing of experiences was useful to all of you. And thank you once again. I really hope to see you all in person at some point in the near future.
Yes,
Thanks.
Yes. Sure.
You're muted, Ivy.
So on behalf of Women's Studies Center, Tezpur University, I thank you, ma'am, for your valuable time and also for the wonderful session, for the wonderful deliberation on organizational culture and climate in promotion of science. So yes, we had a very wonderful interactive session, couple of questions and also opinions. And ma'am, yes, we look forward for more such lectures from you, ma'am, in near future, and hope in offline mode. And had it been offline mode, we would be more glad. So yeah, in future, hope we meet soon in offline mode. And yes, thank you, ma'am. And I would also thank all the students. We had students also from different departments. So I thank all of them, and also all the GSET members for sparing your valuable time and for your kind presence. And yes, we hope for future for your presence for such programs in near future. Thank you once again. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Madhurima.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you, all the GSAT members. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, we get in touch later. Okay.